kind of maybe recap a little what we've done. So we started by saying, what is it that we've learned through the first and the second and the third Freeskools? And we build that body of knowledge. And the idea is that by the time we get to November, December, you'll really have integrated that into your knowledge and your kind of ability to be able to use these arguments in your social organizing is really where we hope we get to by the end of this year. So don't worry about the repetition. It's done on purpose. And each time we will take that body of knowledge and keep deepening it and broadening it as we go. So that's the first thing. And then we moved into a discussion around some of the key ideas on base building and social organizing. And I hope it's been helpful. For me, you know, when I've been thinking about this community of practice, I think about things that I would have loved to have and maybe didn't have at my disposal as we were, you know, as I've been an activist since I was about 16 years old. And a lot of that was just trial and error and trying to educate myself. And I've been lucky to have women in my life, particularly who have been really wonderful activists and who've taken their knowledge and helped me. So I hope that you are able to have people who play the same role for you in your social organizing. And this community of practice is really trying to be that in a broader way, albeit limited. So this third section now, I'm going to just share screen again. I hope you've now had time to see, it's been shared in the chat. It's one of our most popular resource materials, actually. And the reason for that, I think, is because we kept it really simple, but it's actually really, you know, I talked about operational knowledge. There's a wonderful thinker and philosopher called De Bono. If you haven't, here's another name that maybe we should add to the chat, just add De Bono. And he does a lot of work on multiple forms of intelligence. And one of the things that he talks about is we have to do the thinking about thinking. You know, it's not enough just to kind of move through the world and imagine that we just, you know, grow up from the cradle and that we integrate knowledge into our lives and we move. No, we have to think about how we think. And as humans, if we do that, this sort of tip is what we need. This sort of resource tool is what we need. And I'd be interested in any of the other tools like this that you have in your toolbox. And if we can then share it with others across the region. Be clear, the first one, be clear why you're doing this activism, right? So we said that, don't worry, you know, there's a lot of double thinking, triple thinking that happens. So people go, I just don't know if my work's going to be, you know, important enough. I don't know if people are going to pay attention to it. I don't know if the big organizations are going to think it's a stupid set of work. Don't worry about that. If you have a conviction that you have something to move and that you can become part of the social movements, it doesn't matter if it stays small and tight and fierce. That's one set of organizing that's very, very important. So decide just that you're going to make a start. That's the number one tip that we have for everyone. We just started from wherever we were and we started to build our body of knowledge inside DIVA. Okay. Then the second tip which we have is build the politics of engagement. And so that's not about, you know, often when we use the language of politics, as we've said before, people think we mean political parties. That is what we call formal politics. When people gather together and they start a formal political party that then contests an election within a nation state, right? Like Fiji has many, many different parties, political parties. That's not what feminists mean when we talk about politics. What we talk about, when we talk about politics, we're thinking about the power negotiation. Everything that we do is political because it involves negotiation of both privilege and oppression. Every day, all the way, every minute, right? So build your politics of engagement for your organizing group from the very beginning. Don't just think that everybody's going to love you because of your work or everyone's going to hate you because of your work. They will engage with you in different ways because of what your politics is in your group. over time, we are not the same organization we were 10 years ago. Over time, that politics, that negotiation with power, it shifts and changes as you change. So not only the people come and go, but also the politics in the organization will shift over time. You will have had to deal with governments, and sometimes there's different governments in place. Sometimes it's the same one, but you get more relationships with different allies inside. There's more blocks that you come up against. So your politics of engagement will shift over time, right? So that's a good thing. Reflect it in your collective vision and your mission. So one of the dangers is that you set a mission, a vision and a mission at the very beginning, and then you never revisit it. So you're not clear after 10, 15, 20 years if you're still remaining true to your vision and your mission. Some people don't even know what the vision and mission is of their organization. So they can be working there for a long time, and then somebody goes, "What's your vision and mission?" And they're like, hang on, just let me find out. So that's the thing that is supposed to guide your entire set of work. When you go out into the world, you're taking your vision and mission with you from your work. So you should really know it, right? That's your politics. So that's where you start to build. And if you look at the second last line, always work out your own principles and values inside your organization, because when they get tested outside, if someone goes, "Oh, so we just had a situation," I give a concrete example. DIVA doesn't take any money from corporations. We don't take money from businesses and corporations. And there's a reason, right? There's many reasons, but one of the reasons is we work on climate change. And businesses and corporations are one of the worst actors on climate change. So rather than have to work out what they're doing, we just say no money from businesses and corporations. So we just had 2 corporations try and give us money. And I won't say who they are because it's not relevant. But of course, we had to immediately say no. And we got a lot of pressure from other feminists who are trying to help us take that money. "Oh, but they're a good company." The issue is not whether they are a good company. It is about accountability for one, but 2, it's about, it might not be that company, it might be what we call their holding company. One of the ones to which they have a board, a similar board, or they have the same board members. What if it's a good company here, but in its board members, it links to, say, Exxon or Shell or one of the fossil fuel companies? Then even though we are not dealing with Shell, it is the same body of work that comes down to this business. So we've got to be really careful. So one of the things we say in movement is to be just means to be just, but also to be seen to be just, right? So that means that we have to be careful. So that I'm just trying to give an example of how your ethics helps you to say no. If you've already set it down on paper, then you don't have to have a big, long discussion. You already know you made that decision. You can move to the other sets of work that are really in busy lives. Okay, so I hope that's clear. And then 3, I don't think I want to say any more on this. It's just the action and reflection cycles. But you see, the reason why it keeps coming up in all our work is it's absolutely crucial to the work of activists. Make your mistakes, get up again. It's fine. That's about being human. Make our mistakes, get up again. But if you keep making the same mistake, if you see the same mistakes being made, then obviously there's kind of system change you have to look at, right? If the same mistakes are happening all the time, then there is something deeper you have to change in your action. Then 4th is only start to worry about the structure, the process, the form, the membership to achieve the political vision. That's when you build. So get the political vision right and then start to build. And we always say, don't just become an NGO. Everybody becomes an NGO. Why? One of the reasons is because funders like NGOs. Why do they like NGOs? They think it's easier to deal with them. So you work in the particular way, this is the way you move in the world. And if you're a little bit different from that, then sometimes funders are like, "Oh my goodness, what is this fish? This is a different colored fish. This is a different kind of animal in the sea, right? This is what might it be? This is a seaweed, or this is, this is a crab." but it's definitely not a fish. So they say, I don't know how to deal with you because you're not a fish. So this is the issue, is adjust and grow organically, but be prepared to negotiate with everyone you're dealing with. And that's about social movements, right? And I just added in the bottom, I think it's very important for us to think about, you can't work well if the structures and processes are not for the work. They don't have to be for the middle class. They don't have to be for the upper class. They don't have to be for those who are outside your constituency. They have to work for what makes the work happen. Otherwise, what does it say? It will kill the work. Yep, so be clear. Don't conform to others just because they say that's the way it should happen. Okay, then number 5 is build a set of concepts that allow you to explain your feminist politics. So from the very beginning of my activist life, it's been a commitment that I have that if I can't explain it to someone who's a child or a young person, then actually I think I'm doing a very bad job. Because I should be able to communicate it authentically no matter who they are. Doesn't matter who the person is. If I can't, or if they say to me, or I have no idea what you're talking about, then I've really not done my work. And that's for everybody. That's not just for me, that's for everybody. So if that's the case, then you have to find out what that is for you. Not what Diva is doing. All we're saying is the principle applies universally. If it's not being communicated well for the people with whom we work, then we have to really rapidly do some shifts. And sometimes that takes a long time to do it. I'll tell you so to give a concrete example for Diva, we are still struggling on how to do it as well as we'd like to on vernacular sets of work. And that's about many different things. I'll tell you one thing it's about in our country is our craziness around which languages we use. We're not sure if we should have things in English only because that's a national language, in English and Itoke, in English and Itoke and in Indo-Fijian or Fijian Hindi, what kind of Fiji Hindi we use. We're not clear on whether that also means Rotuman. We're not clear on whether that also means Ramdi. So all of these sets of issues mean we kind of step back and a lot of us don't even do anything on it. And then if we do it on it, then we do it kind of on an ad hoc basis because none of us are really sure where are the resources to do that. I think we are actually doing better nowadays on sign language than we are on many of the other vernacular languages. Maybe the interpreters might, have a different set of, maybe people with disabilities might disagree. That might be that we have a lot more work in that area we've got to do. I think so too. There's Braille and many others. So as we're thinking about issues of intersectionality, we have to be really clear about what does it mean to localize knowledge and how do we do that? And not just saying this endless, no, you're right, but how do we change this? How are we going to talk to funders about it so that we have the money to do it? There are professionals who can do the translation, but they ask a lot of money for it. So how are we going to make sure that, one, we know where those resources are in our country, and two, that we're insisting that that's part of the work? How do we translate key documents? Like for us, one of the key documents we are translating this year is the top 10 tips, because we'd like to have that in local language. Maybe we can't do everything, but they are key documents. Yep. Okay, so then 6, what are our red lines? Have we decided what our red lines are? So for Diva, we're just putting forward what our red line is in terms of feminism, right? That we use a human rights frame, that we always talk about bodily autonomy because freedom is the ultimate, that we always talk about sexual and reproductive health and rights, that we always talk about sexual orientation, gender identity and expression and sex characteristics, that we always talk about intersectionality, always on interlinkage, and that we focus on material and structural change. What are your red lines? Are you able as an organization so that if you move into a coalition, if you move into a network structure, that you're very clearly able to articulate, to speak that, to write that to other groups so that we all know what each other's red lines are? Yeah. Number 7. So we're getting there. It's only 10 tips. This is number 7. Pay attention to power differentials, right? Pay attention to privilege and oppression, to inequality in the world and in ourselves. Pull out these, hold them up to the air, and replant them constantly with feminist alternatives. So there are times in every organization, in every set of organizing, when we will have moments when we ourselves are not clear that our practice is good. And then we have to have ways to work on that. It's the same that we see with other organizations. If we look out into the world and we go, oh my goodness, do you see what they're doing right now? If it only stays at that, then that is criticism. If it's a critique of their work and we work out how to speak and to work against that in a new way, then only we are making a shift. Then only it becomes praxis. So the act of criticizing someone is not the act of change. The act of change is the what then? What do we do about that? Is it something I can handle now, or do I need to wait until I have the resources? And I don't mean money. I mean, do we have whatever we require in order to speak back to that situation? Maybe it's not today, maybe it's next week, maybe it's next month. Maybe I raise it now, but it's worked at over a period of time. Maybe I say, I am feeling angry and hurt, but I want to work with you on something new, right? That takes us also from hostility. You get the anger out, but then you work out how you transfer anger into action, into healthy action. The main thing why social organizing dies is because we don't do good conflict transformation. It's one of the things that stops us from being as big as we need to be in our social movements. It's not really actually about personality conflicts. We talk a lot about personality politics, but really what it's about is not taking the time to work on the conflicts and to transform those into some set of work that takes us forward. So that's why we put in number 7, which is don't be afraid of conflict. It's how we move that conflict that matters. Dig deep into the roots. Where does this come from? What I'm feeling, what we're doing in our group, where does this come from? And what do we need to do to shift that over time? Because it also takes away from the guilt and the anger and the pain and everything else we feel when someone we feel is disrespecting us. So we talk a lot right now in feminist movements about suspend judgment and then work out how we are going to move into a set of solutions. As we always say, move to strategy. After we felt all the angst, everything comes out, then you move to strategy. Yeah. Okay. And then that kind of links to number 8, which is, it's a basic thing for humans. How can you transform something if you don't understand it? And yet all of the time we do this as humans. We say, I really don't like what the state's doing, but actually we're not sure how the state functions, right? The nation state. The nation state has a different feeling, no matter, it has a different structure. It has different processes dependent on what country we're in, what society we're in. And I will say, remember, it has a difference dependent on what gender identity you have, on what intersectionality you have. A deaf woman who is trying to interact with the state here in Fiji is not having the same experience as I am having. And I am not having the same experience as a woman in Ngao like Buva is having. Is not having the same experience with the state as Rosa or someone from Papua is having. Is not having the same as a person in New Caledonia who's fighting for decolonization is having. And they might be dealing with 2 states, the state in Kanaki, in New Caledonia, and the French state. So all of these things matter. We have to know from context. And what does that mean then ultimately? That also means we have to trust each other, that we know our context. So a lot of us, we have to move between what's called a majority South and minority North organizing. It used to be called developed and developing, right? A lot of us don't, as I said before, don't like that language because it kind of means like you're developed and you're where we want to go. It's this oppressor become, oppressed become oppressor. Developed and developing is actually about those who have power and who have used it to gain power, and those who don't have enough power to feed our basic needs, right? That's really what we're talking about when we talk about majority South and North peoples. So if we know from where we've come, then we will understand our state, we will understand the United Nations and who has power, more power than others in the United Nations. We will understand even Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat. Who is it who has more power within the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat? Because if any of you think that everybody has equal power in PIFs, then maybe you need to do a little bit of work on structure and, right? This is the reality. Because it is not equal, just like all of those institutions are reflective of where we are in the world today. So to change a thing, to break and to build that thing, you have to know it first. And that's where things like the community of practice, but also our sets of work that we do within our own countries, within our civil society movement, we have to insist on it of each other. If somebody knows how to advocate within one system, one multilateral space, ask that somebody else works with you on that. Build your body of knowledge before you start messing up in that water. Because ego often goes before good strategy. We're like, yeah, we want to go to that meeting, but it's like 2 weeks before the meeting happens. Someone's been working on that for 2 years to get prepared. And we're like, yeah, we're here. And the other groups are going, man, like at least talk to us first, because there's a whole body of work that's been going on. Like get to know those who've been in that space. Now, if they're holding that body of space all to themselves and they don't want anybody in their multilateral system, then you have to do some of the breaking of power, right? And that takes some good conflict transformation work. But what else does it need for social movements? It needs allies. Someone else who maybe was in that space. Oh, Noelene, we want to get into the Commission on the Status of Women work. Oh, okay, set. How will we? I think you should go to this movement meeting beforehand, because if you don't, then it's going to get hard for you within Commission on the Status of Women. So there's lots of work that we can do for each other to get us into spaces where we feel like we need to be there to make our space. Yep, know the system in order. And if you do have to go in and break and disrupt, do it, but do it, with care and beloved community. Do it because you have to do it. Yep. Okay. 9, scrub off and this is linked very much to that, right? Scrub off the patriarchy every day and don't accept it in others. So every day that we're doing this work, one of the things that we know is there are issues that are going on within our organizations that we have to address. There are issues within the movement that we have to address. These happen every day. They're just part of being human. I'd also challenge everybody to say, just remember when you're doing your social organizing that you are also within a patriarchal society, right? You're within a community around the world as well that still doesn't even have lots of spaces for many of us, whether it's women, whether it's young people, whether it's older people. There's a lot of people who don't feel like their issues are heard. So we have to think about how we scrub off the worst of what we are and replace it every day. We just keep doing the lifelong work for ourselves. Yep. Don't accept it in others either. Okay. Build individual, and that links to the last one, which is the really kind of positive frame. Build our individual and our group feminist practice every day. So this is lifelong practice, and it's done in collectives and movements. And it's done in those for a reason, because what? It has to continue after you've gone. So whether you're here or not, the work will keep continuing, because these are huge sets of work, right? They're beyond one lifetime. And that means just look at the pink in this. You don't even, you will have this online. It's about knowing and sharing in different ways. It's about holding and being with people in different ways. It's about sometimes disrupting and breaking in new ways. And it's about building new kinds of engagement. This is actually one of the hardest things for social movements. And can I just put this into the room as something that maybe we take away into this discussion, but also Friday. I found when I was a younger activist, I'd say emergent because it doesn't matter about the age, but as I was an emergent activist, I used to be very good at pointing out what was wrong. And that's a necessary thing, right? Don't get me wrong. You have to do that. What is the harder is when you start to propose, because then your responsibility level increases, right? Because you're trying to propose something that maybe you're not even sure you've done enough work. You know, is the evidence there for that? Does this really work? Am I confident that this works? Does it only work in certain areas, or does it work, you know, all over the world? Do I think this is a small change, or it's actually groundbreaking? All those questions that you have to ask yourself if you're going to propose. So one of the things about social movement work with allies and accomplices, and Wheel is very careful about the difference. An accomplice is someone who works so easily with us. We can work like this because our politics is so close. Not the same, but very close. And as we've said, the allies are those concentric circles. You drop the stone in the pond, those circles go out, and those circles, people are still going, oh, I like what they're doing over there. Yeah, I want to be in alliance with them. But maybe they don't know a lot about your work and you don't know a lot about them. So you work cautiously. So all of those sets of work on building, they are different dependent on how close your politics align. And over time, that might change. You might start only working on this with someone and then it gets bigger and deeper because you find you have really good, strong alliances. And I would say be careful on making assumptions about why someone does or doesn't work with you. Because sometimes I've had, particularly young people I've had in the past to go, oh, you know, they just don't want to work with us because we're young. It might be that. And then you have to work on intergenerational politics, right? It's sometimes that. But sometimes it's because your politics don't align. And it's very hard for people to find that area where they can work together. Sometimes it's the youth group that can't work with someone older, you know, like an older organization. So whatever those challenges are that we have to disrupt and to break and build, let's be clear on the core reasons for them. Sometimes that only comes out over time. We think we know, we say, oh, it's just because they don't like me. It may be that because we're human, but it may be that there is something more we have to work on. Maybe there was a challenge that we didn't work through properly. Maybe it just wasn't the right time. Maybe they were too busy. No, often that's really the thing. It's about human communication. So I really wanted to make that the kind of last thing we talk about is those 10 tips are there, but then you have all of the other sets of things we have to think about as humans when we're in social movements.